Once upon a time, the world's greatest magician was still just a child. The town he lived in was a horrible place. His mother and father, who believe in God, refused to understand him, and his school teachers were all so mean. However, they all looked nice on the surface, so they all had influential positions in the town. While living in that garbage dump of a town, he began to look down on the god who had created such an awful world that was so easily fooled and could not punish liars. So he decided to show them what a real god looked like. He would find the proper rules, since that pathetic god would not. That was the starting point that later led him joining the Great Golden Cabal and developing countless spells and spiritual items. But that did not mean he was successful in everything he did. The more he approached the answer, the more things would get in his way. The stable Cabal ran afoul of infighting. His child collapsed, his wife left him, and his family fell apart. And each time he hit a stumbling block, someone was there, laughing at him from somewhere. If someone were to ask you, who is the best written character in a certain magical index, some of you may say Accelerator, or maybe Misaka Makoto, who are arguably the two most popular characters in the series. But what if I told you, in my opinion, the title actually belongs to Aleister Crowley, who is my favourite character from all the media I have consumed thus far. Those of you who have only seen the anime may find this hard to believe, since the anime has done very little to flesh Aleister as an antagonist or a side character when compared to the novel. All he does is float in a tube of his own piss all day and talk about some vague plan he has with an occasional smirk. Boring. Don't get me wrong, there are still merits to his character in the anime. It is just lacking the intricacies that are found in the light novel that make Aleister captivating, whether he is outside his tube or not. Although from my own observations, many light novel readers regard Aleister as up there as one of the best antagonists in the entire Toaru franchise. His greatest achievement in the Japanese popularity rankings for light novel characters in Kono Light Novel ga Sugoi was reaching 20th best male character in 2017, after New Testament Volume 18 was released. It is still a shame that Aleister has never reached the top 10, let alone top 5 at any given position. But those spots seem reserved for Toma and Accelerator, representing Index instead. Not only do I think he's the best written character, but I also think he is Kamachi's most complex character. I know I am saying a few absolute statements here, and I certainly won't be comparing Aleister to every character in the series to prove it, as let's face it, Index has a gigantic cast of characters, and I would be here all day. However, I believe the points I make in this video will help substantiate my argument, and hopefully make you appreciate this character more. Now, just because a character is complex doesn't necessarily mean they are well written. Sometimes simple characters are more effective in the story as they fulfill their intended role. For example, take most of Quentin Tarantino's characters from nearly all his films. Majority of them are not multi-layered and don't have a lot of depth to their characters, and yet they are still memorable because of their impact in the story and their quirky personalities and dialogue. And the best Index or Toaru equivalent of this is probably Sogita. Sogita isn't exactly a deep character with a deep philosophy that will change your outlook on life. He is just there to cause absolute hype and spread the message or gospel of guts. In contrast, multi-layered characters that have different dimensions to their persona act as a spectrum in which you can view a character from multiple angles depending on your perspective. Multi-layered characters also tend to have significant character development, which certainly helps improve the quality of a long-running series such as Index with 50 light novel volumes and some spin-offs. Of course, regardless if the character is multi-layered or not, What is the most important thing is the execution of their character or their role in the story. What I mean by this is that if they play an effective role in the story, where they contribute a significant amount to the arc or volume, and if the character's motivations for their actions are plausible. Although having ambiguous motivations at the start of introducing a character, especially an antagonist, makes them more compelling to the audience, as we become more eager to learn about why they act against the so-called good characters. This is the case with Aleister, although he is not necessarily introduced as an antagonist with his debut in the Deep Blood arc. He is presented as a figure of authority and influence as the head of the science side, a contrast from Style, who is a representative of the Anglican Church and Necessarius. We get a glimpse of Aleister's character from just this one scene. He appears to possess greater knowledge than Style, with his ambiguous statement about what the existence of Imagine Breaker proves, in addition to his knowledge about vampires and deep blood. This also says a lot about the science side itself. Aleister hides himself in a building with no clear entrance and exit, shut off from the outside world. He represents the true essence of the science side behind the scenes of Academy City. Academy City was established as a purely scientific state, and yet Aleister has knowledge on these very magical elements, combined with his bizarre appearance that is expanded upon in the details of the light novel. Aleister seems out of place in this world of science. He's described as appearing like a saint, sinner, adult, child, man and woman, all at the same time. This description further emphasises that Aleister is a living contradiction. Even more so when you read the design notes Haimura Kiyotaka made when he first drew Aleister. He drew Aleister with the intention of drawing an alien in human skin. So not only do we gather this from Aleister's physical appearance, but also his dialogue, which both are ambiguous and mysterious in nature. And if I'm to praise the anime specifically, I think Toshihiko Seki does an incredible job of adding a mysterious and ominous tone to Aleister's voice. It really fits the character perfectly. Aleister is established as an observer of events, rather than an active participant within them. Again, we see this from both his appearance and words. He is confined within a tube. We, the audience, do not know why he resides in this tube, shut off from the outside world. But at the same time, it makes the audience curious as to why he is there, and hanging upside down for no apparent reason. Since he is in a green surgical gown, it gives a hint that he is possibly there to preserve his own life, which we find out later on that it's true. Aleister orders Style to do Academy City's dirty work, or I should say, they are cooperating to ensure Aureolus Izzard is taken care of in order to avoid a potential war between magic and science. Aleister also requests that Style works with Toma. However, Toma has no idea that Aleister is pulling the strings, so that Toma ends up in another situation where he has to deal with a magic side problem. It presents Aleister as someone who is willing to manipulate the students in a city for his own benefit. This is not directly stated and thrown in our faces, as we can understand it from Aleister's actions and what happens in the story. Style is concerned by Aleister's recommendation to involve Toma, as his fear is that involving an Esper will give the churches an excuse to prove that Academy City are becoming too involved with the magic side's affairs, which would cause tensions or perhaps a war. Aleister, however, is unfazed and is convinced that the situation will not heat up as Style thinks. This says more about Aleister's character, as he remains calm at the idea that this may actually cause a war, and is convinced that everything will progress smoothly. From this exchange, Aleister can be seen as very confident, perhaps even arrogant, and demonstrates a further understanding of how the magic side thinks and operates. Although this scene is very short, we learn so much about Aleister as a character and how he treats other people and how he views himself, which I think is the perfect character introduction. While Aleister is a side character in Old Testament, he is obviously presented as a figure of great importance and authority. From this one scene we learn about many of the character traits that define who Aleister is, and these are largely expanded upon and more details are added that continue to intrigue the audience as the story progresses. While he is presented as a living contradiction which even extends to his philosophy sometimes, this is not necessarily a character flaw, as the opposing elements to his character complement each other well. As the saying goes, opposites attract. Aleister is meant to be the personification of what a human is, both the good and the bad, and his own beliefs and character is tested throughout his life, which I'll discuss later on. Humans are often hypocrites when it comes to their actions and desires, and this is justified in Aleister's case, who is willing to go against his own beliefs and push himself to the limit to achieve his end goal of destroying magic. Aleister is also presented as a mysterious character, and due to his bizarre appearance and as a figure of authority, it intrigues the audience to yearn to discover more about him. He is not mysterious for the sake of being so either. Once we learn that Aleister is in fact the legendary magician Aleister Crowley in Old Testament 6, this mystery becomes smaller as the audience are fed a new detail. But at the same time, the mystery expands. How did the greatest magician become leader of Academy City? The way he acts like he knows everything and seems to use others to do what he wants. All these new details add up and make him more interesting as a result, as you really want to know the answers, and everything about him at this early stage just seemed like a paradox. Even the small detail of him floating upside down in a tube. Like, what the hell is this supposed to mean? Is it a reference to him seeing the world from a different angle? Is it meant to symbolise the upside down cross, which is a symbol of both Satanism and Christianity? In my view, this is clever writing, as it not only gives the audience more desirable information, but also retains hints of mystery, while also adding the new factors into the mix. Why is this important? It's because it keeps Aleister's character fresh. Whenever he does make an appearance in Old Testament, we get a glimpse of his ultimate goal, and his past as the story progresses. And this adds further intrigue when we are given this information and question, how did he end up like this? Why does he want to destroy magic? And why does he need a Magic Breaker? This amazing mystery element to his character inevitably fades away over time into New Testament. But I still think Aleister retains some of this mystery element in a way that his actions can often be unpredictable and his inner thoughts remain ambiguous to this day. But even when we learn the full extent of Aleister's past, the execution of how it was presented as so satisfying that it compensated for the fact that Aleister wasn't as mysterious as he previously was. Going off topic a bit, I haven't addressed the other side of Aleister's origins as a character, which is the most obvious part. That Aleister is largely inspired by the British occultist Aleister Crowley. The fictional Aleister has many parallels to the real-life Aleister, as Kamachi decided that his version would largely mirror the real Aleister's life. Of course, you have the added fantasy and sci-fi elements to the character that obviously didn't exist in real life. The real Aleister instead participated in magic rituals, often with his followers that followed his religion of Thelema. These rituals often involved taking hallucinogenic drugs to gain the effects, or illusion, of magic. This is likely one of Kamachi's inspirations for writing Index, because he's clearly on drugs. Anyway, the fictional Aleister we see in Index is more toned down and a more polished version of the real man himself, which fits a fictional story far more well than if Kamachi just said, nah, my adaptation of this real life person is just going to be the same. Kamachi, however, retained much of Aleister's philosophies in his own story. Thelema acts as a cornerstone of the series itself, for example. Thelema being the ideology or religion founded by Aleister that promotes individual liberty above all other laws. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. The real-life Aleister took this belief to the extreme as he pushed himself to be bound to no other laws, as he enjoyed breaking any taboo he could find. Although love is the law truly means that your individual motives, also known as your will, must not cause harm to others. And yet Aleister was guilty of acts of child cruelty at the Abbey of Thelema in Sicily. What I'm gathering from this is that the real Aleister was indeed a hypocrite, just like most people, although probably not to the same extent as Aleister, who was a bit crazy. The dichotomy of Aleister is that he was so despised and seen as a devil by many, and yet in the 1960s he became an icon of the hippie movement. There are multiple lenses you can view the person known as Aleister Crowley. Sound familiar? While the real Aleister did unspeakable acts of degeneracy, he also aided Britain in the First World War as a spy. His philosophy caused the decline of many Christian ideals in our society, such as not having sex before marriage, and his philosophy, which presented the individual as more important than the state, helped influence the liberal movement in the 1960s from the civil rights movement and the second wave of feminism. Aleister's influence on modern society has influenced most countries that have Western ideals. Therefore, a dramatization of such a figure as an antagonistic force has plenty of material to become a sympathetic or multifaceted villain. The real Aleister allegedly died as a heroin addict who regretted his past actions. Whether you feel sorry for him or not depends on you as a person. Making a sympathetic villain, however, runs the risk of making them seem less menacing, and a villain that isn't menacing, or at least a threat, will often fall like a flat tire, and there must be something to the character that makes us feel that sympathy or empathy for them, as if they are just completely evil, then it's pretty difficult for us to feel that way. Aleister luckily remains threatening due to his acts of cruelty and the fact that he always has a backup plan if he fails. And yes, while Aleister does have some sympathetic elements to his character, such as the personal losses he has faced in his life, it isn't necessarily enough to forgive him completely, and Kamachi does touch upon this. Quick spoiler for New Testament 18, skip to this part to avoid it. Even Toma, the character who can forgive almost any villain, even Fuyama when he tried to nuke the entirety of Eurasia, feels that he does feel sorry for parts of Aleister's life, but he can't truly forgive him or justify what he did. So these sympathetic elements to Aleister's character aren't necessarily enough to justify his actions in the pursuit of what Aleister believes is the greater good. Now let's go back to Aleister as a seemingly side character. I use the term side character to refer to Aleister's early role in the light novels, but perhaps that term is a discredit to the character himself. Perhaps the better term would be a background character, not in the sense that he is a nameless fodder character, but because he looms in the shadowy background of most of Old Testament. Aleister is very, very important to the plot of Index. Without Aleister, you cannot have the story, as Aleister founded Academy City, which is the main location of the series. While his role is mainly that of the puppet master and diplomat, his importance is certified with how he manipulates the main character of the series, Toma, in addition to the other main cast of the series. The only one who falls short of this rule is Hamazura Shiage, who is the living anomaly in Aleister's plans, proving that Aleister's plans have shortcomings, and there are things out of his control, which makes him a lot more interesting than if he predicted everything in the future. Aleister does not have any flashy scenes at this point in the story, apart from the end of World War III. His scenes are mostly just pure dialogue and nothing else. While the other antagonists in Old Testament have an arc dedicated to them, where they take the centre stage as the villain, Aleister is the exact opposite, as he only reveals himself to the world at the end of Volume 22. However, considering he already plays a major role in influencing many of the events and situations of the series, it could be argued that Aleister is the main antagonist of the series overall. And I already made a video about this, but I'll quickly summarise. Even if we look at Railgun, the spin-off of Index, Aleister makes 0 appearances, and yet his influence in the Sisters arc and the Daihasei arcs are undeniable. Aleister truly represents the mysterious and shadowy aspects of Academy City, and that includes the dark side. In this way, he kinda reminds me of Sauron from Lord of the Rings, who doesn't really appear after the beginning, but his shadowy influence can be felt throughout the story. And despite the fact he hardly appears, he still remains very intimidating. While on the surface layer, Academy City seems like a wonderful place, filled with pioneering technology, with countless opportunities for young people, when in reality, Academy City is no more than a giant lab which acts as Aleister's cornerstone to his plan in order to destroy all magic, where Esper powers and his technology, far more advanced than the rest of the world, act as weapons to be utilised to bend the world to his will. Now, I want to move on to the threat that Aleister poses in the series. As if he poses little impact to the world and characters, then it lessens the stakes of the entire story. Sure, bigger stakes don't always make the story better. Index throws around the expectations that the story will continue to increase the stakes by having angel-level world-destroying spells introduced in Volume 4, only for the stakes to drop in Volume 8, which revolves around 2 teleporting espers, which makes the stakes a lot more unpredictable. What I really appreciate about Aleister's character is how he conducts himself when corresponding with representatives of the magic side. He basically acts as a leader who wants peace between the science and magic sides, as he works on multiple occasions with the Anglican Church to avoid war, or an imbalance between the two sides. This is all under the guise of Aleister the board chairman, as Aleister's tube actually masks who he truly is, so that those who see him do not recognise him as Aleister Crowley the legendary magician, but both Motoi and Laura both connected the dots. Otherwise they would just think Aleister is an alias that Academy City's leader has chosen simply to represent the magic side's greatest embarrassment, now as leader of the science side. But Aleister's friendly relations with the Anglican Church is just an excuse for him to involve Toma, who is a harmless level 0 on paper, into the affairs of the magic side, which in turn antagonises the Roman Catholic Church, and in the end causes the war that Aleister seemingly was trying to avoid. But Aleister in fact wanted war to weaken the Roman Catholic Church, the largest church in the world, so that Academy City would ultimately benefit, and he could divert his attention to dealing with other threats to his plan. War is just a stepping stone to him for his grand plan of destroying magic once and for all. It just exemplifies how far Aleister is willing to go, that he would push the entire world down the path to war. This is also including his violation of human rights by using the Sisters Project to create the Misaka network to manifest Iwaz, and how he psychologically torments Accelerator from behind the scenes by sending Kihara Amata and Misaka Worst after him and Last Order. Aleister definitely understands that he is willing to make huge sacrifices to his plan so he can set it back on track, including potentially restarting the entire Misaka network in World War III with the 3rd season project if Last Order ever went out of Aleister's control. Now, this is the part of the video where it'll just be New Testament spoilers, so you've been warned. So if you have only watched the anime, then spoilers ahead. It is revealed that Aleister is cursed to a life of failure. That doesn't mean he can't ever succeed, since Aleister does succeed multiple times in the series, but it does mean in the end he will fail. Now, ask yourself, how does Aleister combat this to make him one of the most overwhelming and threatening villains in the series? We don't learn this fact until New Testament 18, so up until that point, Aleister achieving his goal was still very likely. But let's say we start rereading Index from the very beginning, with this prior knowledge. Aleister is completely obsessed with making plans. As revealed in Old Testament 6, he has thousands of plans, and this is later expanded upon. He has several main plans running simultaneously, possibly some he has never even considered as plans, but he has laid the framework already for them to be adopted into his plan. Then you have twice as many sub-plans in case these main plans fail. This cycle probably continues with these sub-plans too, and so on and so on. While having so many plans seems very convoluted, it is in fact surprisingly plausible considering Aleister has spent about 60-70 plus years in a tube all day, and it is established that Inari, aka Mina Mathers, helps process his plans, so he has a futuristic AI also developing plans for him. Now, you may ask yourself, why do any of these plans even matter? It is because no matter if Aleister succeeds or fails, his plans are so numerous and are constructed in the method that no matter the result, he will find a way to bring him closer to his ultimate goal of destroying magic and bringing back the pure world. So failure is not as impactful for Aleister, because failure in his eyes can be beneficial. If fate decides that his successes are now his failures, then his vast amount of plans have managed to trick fate itself into giving him an advantage. This combined with his life support machine that extends his life by nearly 2,000 years, Aleister can wait as long as he needs to fulfill his goal. So putting this all into perspective, Aleister has declared war on fate and the gods that control the universe. The reason why Aleister manipulates others is because they can succeed, and if they succeed when they have links to his plan, then Aleister himself succeeds. So if Aleister acts accordingly to the framework of if everyone on Earth are his pawns, then their success will rub onto him. Then fate will have to condemn all humans on Earth to failure to prevent Aleister from succeeding. Although, since Aleister is the only person alive still to be affected by this curse, then fate cannot condemn the entirety of mankind to the same fate as Aleister. We see over time as Aleister progressively draws closer towards his plan, which establishes him as a mastermind, in addition to where he punishes Fiamma and attacks the true magic gods all by himself. This, along with the fact that on paper the result matters little to Aleister, therefore this establishes Aleister as a threat that will remain no matter what happens, which is a scary prospect in the story that Aleister truly cannot be defeated on paper, as he can manipulate defeat to his advantage. This presents Aleister as an insurmountable obstacle to overcome, but it is not written in a way which suggests Aleister is some all-knowing being who always has the Uno reverse card to pull his way out of any situation. As with the cases of Choronzon being Laura Stewart, and Hamazura surviving everything Aleister sends at him, or Kamisato's sudden appearance in Academy City, there are plenty of factors that Aleister had no knowledge of or failed to predict, meaning he is also vulnerable, but not to the extent that it lessens the threat of him as a villain. This makes him more realistic, while also retaining that level of threat he poses in the story. 32 minutes in, and we should end part 1 here, since if I drone on any longer, it's going to be much more of a slower ride for you all, so thank you for watching part 1, and stay tuned for part 2 next week. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.